Thank you for joining me today. I'm very excited to introduce this new book and workshop, and I know the two of you are going to do it justice as you talk about the material and the new information. Ruby, if you would start, I think most everyone knows you, but just let us know again who you are, and then we'll go over to Vern.
Dr. Ruby Payne, and one of the things that many of you know is that wrote the framework for understanding poverty, and then co-wrote Bridges Out of Poverty, and now 20 years ago we did a book for churches, but now we are revising that and looking at it differently. And Vern has co-authored with me on this book.
Thanks, Vern.
Well, my name's Vern Reed. I'm a retired educator who spent most of his years working with at-risk students and families. Early on in my career, I found the work of Dr. Payne, and it greatly impacted what we were able to do in our program and coming alongside these young people and families. And so I'm blessed to be a retired educator, and I get to work with Ruby on a variety of things, including this book, which is near and dear to both our hearts.
Good. Vern, why don't you take it first? So talk about the idea behind the book, and then we'll have Ruby come in and talk about her version of that.
Sure. Well, as I said, I used Dr. Payne's work for a number of years in my job as the at-risk coordinator at two different schools. Along the way, I was also a part-time youth pastor, and naturally, the learning from Dr. Payne's work kind of crossed over into my work with young people in a church setting. And the longer I worked on my walk with Jesus and worked with what we call at-risk families and kids, the more I realized that if the church could get a hold of this learning, if the faith community could get a hold of this learning, it would just be easier to create real relationships that allow us to share Jesus along the way.
Ruby, I know that you co-wrote the first church book many years ago, but you're also pretty involved in your Sunday school class. And as you think about this in relation to your own experiences and others, talk about your idea for this book.
Well, one of the things I've increasingly, as I talk to people over the years, because February 16th of this month, I will have had the company for 30 years, okay? So in the 30 years I've had the company, and I've talked to people all over the world, literally, and the United States, a lot of the people who got out of poverty themselves, a lot of adults, almost all of them identified that there were either an educator or a church that was very involved in that transition. And so I got to thinking about, and then the research on the homeless is very much that churches do, as an institution, do more to alleviate homelessness than virtually any other institution, or church affiliated foundations like Salvation Army, like Goodwill, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got to thinking about the role of the faith community. And honestly, I think that in the research on resiliency and ability to deal with very difficult situations, one of the key factors in that resiliency is a deep faith in a higher power. And so I thought, we really need to address this more directly. And one of the things about Vern's church, Hope City, is that the name of your church?
We're Harmony Bible, but City Hope Foundation is part of our church. Yes, ma'am.
Right. And you actually have a alternative high school involved in that, right?
We have a dropout program in which we're utilizing a lot of the learning with our volunteers. Yes, ma'am.
Right. And so I became very interested in how do we talk about this in a way that actually gives people a leg up, that they actually not only have the knowledge base about transition, but they also have the faith base to have the resiliency to be able to do it.
Got it. So Vern, as you went through the writing process and your thinking process, what were you expecting the outcomes to be for those that are wanting to hear the workshop, read the book?
Right. Well, I think that the idea was to put together Dr. Payne's learning in a way that the average church person can both understand and apply to their own lives, right? So the hope and prayer is that maybe a small group takes up the book and works through it together and finds themselves maybe challenged in the way they view poverty and what happens in poverty, especially when we tend to view things through our own life experience.
Right.
In that process, if I'm challenged in a small group, then I might be apt to also want to share it with leadership in a way that leadership could look at applying an intentional process that helps volunteers not be so overwhelmed by what they don't understand in the first place. And I think often that overwhelmedness gets in the way of really being willing to build those relationships and love your neighbor as yourself.
We talk a lot in our work, not just with this new book and workshop, but our other solutions, how important relationships are. But as both of you think about your time through the years working with church or church-facing institutions, can you provide some examples of how relationships might have been broken very quickly?
Well, I'm going to let Vern take that one because he's got a really current example.
Well, I think there are probably a lot of people in the faith community like myself who maybe didn't know what I didn't know as it relates to the research and how living in a constant struggle like poverty impacts the brain and the way it works. And so often I can think of examples in my walk where in a youth group setting, as I had snacks, and I had a young man cramming his pockets with snacks. And I got on him a little bit about, hey, we got to share those with everybody else. And he just shut down on me. I had triggered him. I had triggered a brain response that we tend to see as a behavior response, because the reality for him was he was putting snacks away later for his brothers and his sisters. And it took me weeks to be able to rebuild a relationship. And if we hadn't had a relationship to begin with, we never would have rebuilt it. So think about a situation in church outreach like a pantry, where someone like myself approaches somebody in a well-meaning manner, but doesn't understand what poverty does to the way the brain functions and how I can be a walking trigger to elicit a response that creates a hurdle for building that relationship.
Well, and I think the other thing that happens is another thing that happens in churches is people church members get so overwhelmed that they shut down.
Right.
And so what happens then, you've got an institution that shuts down and neither can help the other. Like one of the things in my church right now is they have about 40 families come to there every month for support and help, food, electricity, etc. And they give each family about $250 a month. Well, now they're saying we don't, that fund is dry. We don't have any more money and we don't know what to do. And so the whole idea that you would build in not just help you get by, but help you get a different understanding so that you can move on. And then there's that whole concept of when helping hurts. And that's another thing that happens. You know, I had a woman talk to me last 2 weeks ago. She said, Ruby, I give and give and give and give to this family and nothing changes. And so we ended up talking about how you think about that and what that means. When does helping hurt?
Right.
Yeah. Some people can't take care of themselves, a physical illness, a disability, a learning disability, age, they're too young, they're too old. That's a different ball game. And I think that people understand that. They're not sure what to do in other situations.
Could I add to that a little bit?
Please.
Well, I think, and Ruby and I have talked about this quite a bit, churches like other resource providers, sometimes we're stuck in, the best example I can give is offering programs that are very necessary Band-Aids for what's going on now, right? Pantries, helping with transportation, helping people find jobs. But I think churches and other resource providers are looking for things that are more than a Band-Aid. Don't get me wrong, we must have the Band-Aids. But our goal is to come alongside people, love them as our neighbor, and help them move towards a more sustainable situation in our case while we're creating relationships and sharing Jesus. And I think this work applied in the church setting can help with that process. And so when we can really walk alongside people and help them move towards more sustainability, the church takes on a part of the world that we need more than ever. And that's kind of what we hope this book can help do.
I see the church as kind of a microcosm of how we talk about the Bridges larger community, because you have to have mindset changes within the congregation for funding to continue and for those volunteers to move forward to say, hey, we're willing to walk alongside.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think for a long time, people tried to keep the two communities separate.
Yeah.
The government separate from the church. Okay. And I think, or the institutions in the community separate from the church. But I think there's an understanding coming that you can no longer have those kinds of separations and have an effective community. You're going to have to all work together because the resources are becoming more stressed and more stretched. And so people are thinking, we really have to have a better understanding community-wide, and churches have to be a part of that conversation.
So Vern, you had mentioned small groups, but in my mind, I'm thinking Wednesday night groups, Sunday school classes, small Bible studies, those kinds of groups really work well with this book.
You bet. Absolutely. If you've been involved in small group, you work through biblical teaching, geared towards taking your faith and making it a true action word, because that's what we're called. We're called to action. Faith is just this. It doesn't sit there. You can't believe in Jesus and have your faith just sit there. So the idea is that it helps both the small group move forward to maybe understanding that while missionaries are an important part of church outreach, we have mission work right in our backyard. Yeah. And we're taught that the harvest is ready, but the workers are few. And our hope is that the book helps people in small group or the large church as a setting feel more comfortable as they step into that mission, into that harvest right here in our backyard. The reality is the percent of people struggling to survive in poverty continues to get higher.
Yeah.
And the church, in many ways, is best situated to help alleviate that situation.
The homeless, there's a homeless organization in Corpus Christi where I live that is faith-based. And he told me that using Getting Ahead and that whole approach to help people have a knowledge base, how to negotiate and grow resources, he told me that seemed to be the identifying characteristic between who made it out of his homeless shelter and who stabilized and who did not. And so part of the reality is, how do you stabilize individuals? How do you move them into a productive? And we have a lot of ROI on that. But I think the larger thing now is, I think it's imperative that we're going to have to involve the faith-based community.
I agree. Totally, I do agree. I believe I've read the book, and thank you for letting me do that even before the publishing date. But what I am taking away from the information would be that it would also help church leadership begin to design a way for them to get the most ROI from their volunteers, from their finances, and put together a plan for churches as they're able to help those that are coming to them.
And yes, and let me give you one example that just happened. In our Sunday school class, we have a family we work with, and their electricity got cut off because she did not pay the bill. She didn't go through the mail, okay? And it was in the middle of her father dying, so you can understand that, okay? But she called my husband to get help to get the bill paid, And he said to her, this is an example of how you make a different intervention when you kind of know the situation and you know the hidden rules. Okay. He said to her, do you have the money to pay the bill? She said, yes. He said, do you know how to pay the bill? She said, no. He said, here's how you go pay the bill. And do you have gas in your car? She said, yes. He said, then here's how you go pay the bill. And she went and paid the bill. So the bottom line is, it's that kind of coaching and that kind of understanding, knowing which questions to ask, that make for better interventions. Because it would have been very easy for him to go pay the bill, but that wasn't the point. The point was, how can I enable you to survive your environment?
I'm thinking, I can't remember the ad, the more you know, the more you know. Have you ever seen that ad, right? And I think about our church and our church situation. And of course, our ultimate goal is to share Jesus, bottom line. It's pretty hard to share Jesus if you've not built real relationships. And in so many cases, our outreach right now is that Band-Aid that doesn't allow for the building of real relationships. Right. So I see this as leadership being able to take the book and the work and becoming intentional and building in the learning into all processes, which will then help us build real relationships that allow people to connect to the church, which isn't the most important thing. But by connecting to church, we get to share Jesus. And really, one of the many things I've loved about my experience with Bridges Out of Poverty is we're not trying to take the place of anything. We're trying to be part of the process by using the learning to help you do better what you already do well. And that's part of why I think it fits the church so well.
Just one last example about this. I was working with a situation that was out west, and they were so upset about this young man who was living by himself in a trailer. And they went over there to help him, and the trailer was full of trash. And they said, it's awful. I said, stop, just a sec. Does the kid have a car? No. Okay. Does he have trash pickup? No. Does he have trash bags? No. I said, so help me understand. How's he going to deal with the trash?
Right.
And so they were like, oh. I said, there's so many hidden layers here that if you don't know, you don't know, which is what Vern was saying.
Right.
Well, and you, Ruby, stated so well when we had some of the readers from my church pre-read the early drafts. One of the gentlemen was almost brought to tears. He was so upset as he worked through the mental models of what it looked like to survive an instability like poverty versus how he saw people surviving. And that's at least half of the battle. For me, at least it was. Having a more accurate view, right? So I'm not trying to put it's ironic that I claim Christ as my Savior, but it's this learning that helped me understand how judgmental I was.
Well, you just don't know. You just don't know.
Right. Right. And my view of the world, as you have said before, comes from my background, my experiences, my education, and not everyone is the same.
And the beauty is in Bridges and in this book, in no way, shape, or form are we saying one view is better than the other, right? There's just things that research has showed us that we can do to move towards living in stability and things we can do as a church to help people in that process.
So if I am a member of a church, if I'm in a Sunday school, small group, home church, and I hear about this information, what I'm taking away today is it can be done as a group study. It can help as a mindset change. It can begin as a platform for springing off on how you can better help your neighbors. It really is a comprehensive approach to doing business differently within the church.
I think that's all that needs to be said right there.